Hello, everybody. It's Michael Hollands once again for Sound of the Movies. Today, I have the pleasure to once again be joined by the fantastic Marco Beltrami. Since 1996, Marco Beltrami has become one of the industry's most interesting, versatile, and accomplished composers. His massive list of credits includes the Scream franchise, Mimic, Hellboy, Resident Evil, Blade 2, Terminator 3, Live Free or Die Hard, A Good Day to Die Hard, Logan, Wolverine, Max Payne, Soul Surfer, The Giver, Knowing, I, Robot, The Faculty, Flight of the Phoenix, Matilda, Gods of Egypt, Carrie, World War Z, The Homesman, 310 to Yuma, Ben-Hur, The Hurt Locker, The Snowpiercer, Quiet Place, Ford v Ferrari, and many more. On this episode, we will cover some of his career highlights and, of course, current projects such as Love and Monsters, The Way I See It, and Chaos Walking. It is my pleasure to welcome again the great Marco Beltrami.
Thank you, Michael. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you again on my show. Thank you very much for taking a time out of your busy schedule. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And Marco, I know you had studied musical composition at Yale School of Music, and afterwards you studied film scoring under Jerry Goldsmith. How did your education and Jerry Goldsmith's tutelage shape your future?
Well, coming out of music school, an academic environment, you're sort of taught to focus on complexity. And a lot of what I was doing and other students and faculty and the music was sort of riddled in complex ideas. And I don't know if that was part of the snobism or if it was part of just the culture of everything. There was definitely great ideas, but a lot of stuff got hidden, I think. And when I came out to California to study with Jerry through the University of Southern California, where he was teaching that year, the biggest thing to me, the biggest change was that he stressed simplicity and being as simple and as economical as possible, both for the playability of the score, but also for the ideas themselves, that you want to, in a score, almost whittle down the ideas to the most basic motive possible, almost like an acorn from which the tree of the score can blossom. And everything that's in the score should somehow be recognizable in its most basic form to the original ideas, and these ideas could be either a melodic idea or harmonic progression or even just a timbral thing, and that's something that really stuck with me, that contrast from being in an academic environment to being in this more professional environment. Which I thought was great. I mean, there were a lot of similarities in terms of curiosity and investigation of timbres and pushing techniques and doing all that stuff, because Jerry loved doing that too. So I'm not saying it was completely opposites, but there was a different structure of how to develop ideas.
Great. And I can imagine Jerry being a fantastic teacher. I mean, he wrote some of the best scores in the history of music and film music. So, I mean, he could do it all. He wrote fantastic action music, romantic themes, and so on and so forth. And I can imagine it must have been a great learning experience, learning from the master.
Yeah, I mean, he was temperamental. He had days where he was very lucid with you and you got a lot out of it, and some days it's like you couldn't do anything right. So he had a lot going on in his life as well, and he's not a professor. He's not like born to teach. He was doing this as something to try, and so you had to bear with it a little bit. It was a great start. It was a great year in my life.
Yes, I bet it was. And thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on that, Marco. And as I mentioned in my introduction, you've been a part of this great industry for almost 3 decades. And I would like to talk about the long road of rising to the top and actually managing to stay there. How would you describe your journey? What was it like to start out and to manage to become one of the industry's best composers and actually managing to maintain great relationships with directors and becoming an inspiration for so many fans and young composers?
Oh, well, thank you. That's kind of you to say. My start was with the Scream movies. You mentioned 1996, which is the year that Scream came out. And for me, it was a new experience for me. I was rooted in new music and new music techniques, and I applied some of that stuff to the score of Scream, but I really didn't know any of the horror movie music conventions. I was definitely not a fan of horror movies. Scream was actually the first, horror movie I had ever seen. I wasn't familiar at all. There was a lot of references in those movies to other movies like Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street. And when I first met with Wes, I had no idea what these references were about. I think one of the things that attracted Wes to what I was doing and hiring me was this innocence, because I was approaching the films from maybe the point of view of the characters and just being frightened myself and what just having a really visceral reaction to it. It wasn't jaded at all. It was very genuine, and I think he responded to that. And the movies themselves were a little bit over the top, and they could afford this almost a slightly operatic approach to the scores, and the movies did well. They did well, and before long I was doing a lot of horror movies. Halloween, H2O, and movies for you mentioned Guillermo del Toro for some of his movies, and a Danish director, Ola Bornedal.
Yes.
And I don't know, maybe in the course of 2 years I did like 10 horror movies. It came well to me. It came easily, but I never really thought of myself as a horror movie composer. It just sort of happened. So I was at the same time, trying to look at ways that I could branch out and do other things. I managed to. There was a TV movie that I did for Oprah Winfrey Productions called David and Lisa.
Yes.
Which is much more of a drama, romantic type score. And that, I think, gave me a little bit of visibility outside of this horror world. I tried to keep very good relations. I mean, I was doing a lot of work with Dimension Films, which was a subsidiary of Miramax, the Weinsteins, the infamous Weinsteins. Although they were very demanding and difficult, they did give me a great opportunity. And I think what they really taught me was how to deal with directors and schedules in extreme circumstances. They everything after them seemed like child's play. You know, it was so, they were so demanding. I remember being at my brother's wedding in the east end of Long Island. He was getting married at some vineyard, and I was in the wedding party, and while I'm there, I noticed these black cars pulling up, SUVs. There was 3 SUVs that pulled up, and everyone's looking like, well, who are these people? And they're just people standing by the cars waiting until the thing was over. And as soon as it was over, they said, you need to come back to New York with us. We have a movie you need to do right now. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. You know, I had to leave the wedding to go work on a movie. So it was an experience unlike I've had since, and it was demanding in such crazy ways, you know, working for a director, but also working for a whole shadow editing team at the studio that was also doing their own edit of the same movie. You know, crazy things where you're not just answering to one master, but you have different people that you're. So I think that all that stuff gave me, in a way, an advantage when dealing with just the normal business, and I was like, wow, this is how it can be. Wow, that's amazing. So so I think that helped out a lot. I think having good guidance from my agents, and listening to them and seeing what other mistakes that other composers made. You know, I when I was starting out, I did some work for other composers, and I think one of the big lessons was just trying to see the movie business from the director's point of view. There's so many things they have to deal with, and music is just one of them. Trying to put myself into other people's shoes. It's a collaborative business.
Yes.
And I think that maybe served me well in terms of making me an agreeable person to work with, I guess.
Yes, yes. And Marco, I think you're right. The industry requires lots of commitment and also a thick skin to a large extent, I believe. And the wedding story is amazing. And also, I think you have to have been there in order to really fully understand and believe it. That sounds really, really crazy. And I believe it makes every other every other scenario sound like or look like a cakewalk compared to that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't it also a fact that somebody, an executive or producer, also once tracked you down at the pub or a bar and they pulled you out?
That was around the same time. There was, when we were doing, it was, I mean, these schedules were insane. It was in Santa Monica. I lived in Pacific Palisades at the time. And there was a movie called Scary Movie. It was Scary Movie 2. And so somehow they must have called the house and found out where I was. I was sitting at the bar with my friends, and the bartender says, is one of you Marco Beltrami? I'm like, yeah. Oh, there's a call for you here. Mark, you got to get back to your studio right now. And I'm like, what? What's going on? And then it was funny. Randy Spenlove, who is now the head of music at Paramount, he used to work at Miramax Dimension, and he's like, we have this movie, and this was on a Friday. It was either Thursday or Friday, and we have this movie, and we need a score for it, and we have to record the score on Tuesday. And I'm like, what? A whole score for an entire movie. We had 4 days. And so I invited all my friends, composer friends that I knew, to meet. We all met up at my studio with Randy, and he went through the movie with us and talked about what we need to do, and we talked about where the music is, and we had a very quick spotting session, and I came up with a few themes and just started handing music out to everybody. You got to do this scene, and everyone was working on this thing. It was crazy, and then we had these scoring sessions at the old Paramount stage, which is no longer there, and we started recording on Tuesday morning, and the sessions went on and on and on through the night into the next day. And I was conducting, and I was delirious by the end of it. It was just such an insane schedule. So yeah, I mean, that was another experience of working under pressure. Nothing gets more intense than that.
Marco, I know you have an appointment coming up, but I would like to talk about a few more things and also some of your best scores. And you work with Guillermo del Toro. You worked with him on Mimic in 1997, Blade 2, Hellboy, and also the one which he produced, Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. And he seems to be a director that allows creativity, and music is important to him as a result. Especially Mimic, Hellboy, and Blade offer big and bold scores, the huge orchestration, great writing. And Marco, how would you sum up the collaboration with him? What is his special gift as a director?
Well, he, like you said, he's very creative, and I think he encourages creativity in people that he works with. And innovation. One of my most favorite scores I've done is Hellboy, and on that, it was like a perfect working relationship. When he was shooting, I went over and saw some of what he was shooting, and I came back and started writing thematic material and sending it to him even before the film was done. And I think too often what we do is in isolation. The movie's done, and they have a temp score, and you're supposed to do something that is like the temp because they're testing it and it works and they find this. But with Guillermo, it was always about working from scratch and coming up with ideas. And I think probably that really made the score shine a little bit, and gave me the confidence to push the boundaries a little bit.
Yes, and Mimic, I remember this one fondly, and they also released the deluxe edition as they did with Hellboy. And Mimic, the main title, was fantastic, and some of the action writing was really spot on. And especially Hellboy is, I think, one of your early masterpieces, and the textbook example of film scoring for a movie of this kind, if I may say so.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. It's definitely a correlation between having fun, I think, enjoying what you're doing, and a good score. Because when you enjoy it, you're able to, well, I don't know if relax is the right word, but you're able to tap into a deeper part of your creative sense, as opposed to when you're stuck trying to do something that people say works because it's the temp, and you feel hamstrung a bit. So having the freedom and the confidence to explore is really a great situation for a composer.
Yes. And I have never met Guillermo del Toro to this day, but I can imagine he must be a very funny and humorous person. I just recently
Oh, he's very funny.
yeah,
Very funny. Yeah.
I I remember the Blade 2 DVD featurette. It's 20 minutes long, and you were conducting, and Guillermo was in the booth sitting next to Buck, I believe, Buck Sanders, and he was saying something, and Guillermo picks up the mic and says, Marco, don't listen to him. He's totally insane. He was in the back masturbating, whispering your name. That was hilarious. I mean,
Yeah. He's very much got that sense of humor, so it's really funny.
But I think it's also very important for you as an artist and a composer to escape typecasting and to score many different genres. I know certain people associate you with action, thriller, and also horror, but there is much more to your filmography than this. You also did the Dangerous Life of the Altar Boy, Soul Surfer, The Giver, Matilda, Trouble with the Curve. Those also need to be mentioned, and I think you've shown great versatility in your career.
Well, thanks. I probably sometimes I'm asked, what's your favorite genre? And I think probably the thing that I most gravitate to, probably because it's been the biggest influence on me since I was a kid, the movies that were that really resonated with me when I was young were spaghetti westerns, the Leone Morricone collaboration, and so I think in a way I try to find every movie to me is like a Western, or I try to find that element to it. I certainly in Scream, I did. But when I was finally able to work with Tommy Lee Jones on Three Burials, and
Yes.
then that 3:10 to Yuma, which came about as a result of Three Burials, I really felt like, oh, now I can really have fun and pay homage to the things that got me inspired to be in this business in the first place.
Yes. And I think those movies and this genre offers a great canvas for a composer. And Marco, how would you describe the process of incorporating your own personality into these scores, also using your dramatic instincts?
Well, for me, the thing that is always something that I like to do is again going back to what Jerry taught me at first, like finding the essence of what the picture is and working from that. And let's take 3:10 to Yuma for example. That movie is, although it's set in the late 1800s and all, it's very anachronistic, and I thought musically it'd be fun to do the same thing, to take instruments that could have been around at that time, but treat them in a very modern way through recording techniques and processing and just playing around with the timbres and sounds. And that's something which I think has become a very personal component of my style. And it's funny how these things all go back to the early beginnings and the things that I learned as well. So it's and the same thing in the Three Burials,
Yes.
working with sounds, processing, making rhythmical sounds out of the sound of the cactus thorns, plucking them as percussive instruments. And it's something that over the course of these years, especially working with Buck Sanders, who's been with me since 97, it's part of the process that I really like, and it's become maybe a defining part of who I am too.
Yes, great. And you just mentioned the 3:10 to Yuma, which I think is one of James Mangold's best movies, and I definitely need to rewatch that movie. A very good Western, and you also got an Oscar nomination on top of that.
Yeah, yep, that was first, and it was very exciting.
Yes, I bet it was. And didn't you experiment with the piano also extensively on 310 to Yuma?
Yeah. So again, back we were thinking, well, back then in the late turn of the century or late 1800s, they probably had tack pianos where they actually fitted tacks into the um, mallets, and that would hit the strings, and that became a sort of characteristic sound of saloon pianos and all that. So we did that. We actually took a piano and did that, but then we started working with other ways to use the piano as a sound by putting fishing wire in between the strings and bowing particular notes that became the theme for the bad guy in the movie.
Great. And I love these, or I love the way how you experiment, and also the Homesman when you record on the outside of your studio in Malibu.
That was fun. Yeah. Again, well, my collaborations with Tommy Lee Jones have been really a highlight of my career, just because he too is someone that doesn't use temp scores and really encourages experimentation and this whole idea of building an aeolian harp
Yes.
that across the hillside that captures the Santa Ana winds. Most people will say you're crazy, and Tommy was like, "Build it, do it. I don't care if we have to hold up the production for this. You got to do it." So that's it's a rare treat to have that.
That's a really good thing if you have a director who actually encourages you to do that, and as opposed to saying, "No, we can't do that. We don't have the budget or the time." So that's really to his credit.
Yeah,
And of course, he is a very good actor, and the films he directed are really something. But there are also, of course, other directors which I would like to briefly mention here. Alex Proyas, for instance, whom you worked with on iRobot, knowing also Gods of Egypt, for instance, and especially Gods of Egypt is one of my favorites and a fan favorite in general. It's kind of the your version of the Mummy, if you will. You can hear some, at least that's what I think. You can hear some of Jerry Goldsmith's Mummy in there, and the the way you wrote the music and how it was written to picture. I think it's still one of your best efforts in terms of orchestration, in terms of writing.
that was such a fun project to do. We were able to. Well, first of all, it was a really music driven film. It's a shame that the movie didn't get a little bit better marketing and all that. Not, I don't. It's not. It wasn't that widely known, but I think it would make a really fun. If it was a little better known, I think it would be a really fun cine concert to do because you could actually play the music all the way through and have the picture, and I think it'd be a really exciting. Let's just say we definitely pushed the orchestra on that. It's and there is the soul of Jerry in it. But you're right. It was a really fun project.
They also included that during the World Soundtrack Awards ceremony when they did a concert on your music, right?
Yeah, they included a little suite from that, but I mean, you could actually play it because it's pretty much wall to wall. You could really play through from the beginning of the movie to the end. I think it would hold up better than any other movie I've done.
Marco, are you at liberty to already disclose some details on A Quiet Place 2?
The movie's good. I mean, it takes off where the other one left off, and there's a lot of thematic continuity in the music between the two scores. There's a couple new themes for some new characters, but there's also a development of a lot. It's in the same sound world, the same harmonic and melodic world as the first one.
Especially also in the Quiet Place, the music really has room to unfold, as it is really another character in the movie. There is very little dialogue, lots of room for a musical development. And Marco, if I may ask, I've heard that it was quite difficult to work with the film's director, as he also was very demanding and hard to please.
Yeah, it was definitely a challenge. I I don't want to get into all the specifics of it, but let's say the director had a lot of pressures on him. This was sort of his first movie, and I think it was maybe things got a little bit overwhelming at times, but we did it. We worked out and together, and we got through it, and we got a score that we both were proud of. So I think all's well that ends well.
Marco, before we run out of time, I would like to briefly cover your most recent projects, also Love and Monsters, Paramount Picture, which is now available also on Netflix. You and Marcus Trump scored it. I would like to briefly talk about this project and your collaboration with Marcus, whom I believe has been working with you for quite some time now, if I'm not mistaken.
Marcus is amazing. He's one of your compadres.
Yes.
He's a monster composer, has amazing ideas. And we share a similar aesthetic. Finding someone that you like to work with in this business is really special, because it's a very solitary business usually. But to find people that you like to work with makes the business that much more fun. And Marcus, I met him, 15 years ago or something, and he started doing some orchestrations and did some cues, and then so now we're collaborating, and what can I say? I can't say too much good about him.
The collaboration between you and Marcus worked out really, really well, and it's great to have a team that you can trust. And also, I just today I rewatched The Way I See It, a great documentary, and you scored it with Brandon Roberts and also Buck Sanders. It's an in-depth look into the life of Barack Obama. And I think it's a very subtle and also very interesting and also emotional score. So you and your team got to combine many different elements, and also you were able to give it a, let's say, homogeneous sound.
Well, yeah. So we were able to do that because, Buck I've been working with since the beginning, and Brandon also, he's another. Him and Marcus, I got to know them well. I guess Brandon a little bit after, but they were actually schoolmates together at the USC program in film scoring, and him too. It's over the years he's someone else that just really worked seamlessly with. So it seemed natural to do that. It was another quick turnaround type of thing. And I had previously done with Brandon a movie called Free Solo.
Yes.
And another documentary for the same producer. So it just seemed like a natural fit.
Yes, and Free Solo, you actually also won the Emmy Award for that one, and that's a very interesting documentary which I encourage everyone to check out. It's really captivating, and the whole imagery, of the free solo climbers and how their life hangs in the balance, so to speak. If you make one tiny mistake, that was it.
Yeah, that's true. It was even though I've scored the movie and seen it many times, every time I watch it, I still get anxiety.
Very impressive cinematography in the whole look. So I guess also from your, let's say, in your line of work, it can be very overwhelming to to watch images of this kind, these great, let's say, inspiring images yet frightening ones.
Totally, totally. It definitely inspired the music.
Marco, I know you have to run. I would just like to thank you for taking so much time out of your busy schedule. I really appreciate that. I had a great time talking to you, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as well.
Very much so. Likewise, it's fun to reminisce about some of these old movies and stories, and I appreciate you having the interest and taking the time.
Marco, I'm looking forward to chatting again down the road.
Thank you, Michael. Have a great rest of your weekend.